My name is Trevor Cook. I'm with Jam Solutions, and I'm just going to talk to you quickly about filter context and filter context transitions in DAX. And so, Chris, I totally agree with you. The heart and the center of the universe for Power BI is the data model. There's nothing worse than trying to work your way around a bad data model. And so context transition in DAX and filter states in DAX really can be challenging. And so I just want to kind of demystify that. And there's a couple of good resources out there that I've come across lately. One is by Ruth Martinez from Kerbal. She did a great video on filter context transitions in DAX, and the SQL BI guys have a great article on it as well. So there's links in this presentation. I'll show them at the end. And so the general idea of filter context in DAX is it's the application of filters in a DAX expression. And the DAX expression can be in a measure or in a calculated column or in a DAX query that you've written against an analysis services database or instance. And so the filtering can be either, and there's a couple different ways to do it, right? So this note here is actually kind of important. I stole this from SQL BI. There's the link there. And so you can apply multiple filters to it. And so if you think of year and location, or date and location, those are two filters, and they're going to be applied with a logical and. So it's this year, this date range, and this location. So there's two different types of filter context. One is explicit and one is implicit. The explicit one is done in the formula. So you actually say, I've got the wrong formula in here, but this sum formula here, if you wrapped a calculate statement around it, you could add a filter in there as well. And that would be the explicit. This sum, if you drop it into a visualization and then you add a date column or a location column, similar to what Chris had up earlier, that is going to be implicit filtering. So, and the implicit filtering is done, in a visual through rows or columns and slicers. So here is the example, the implicit versus the explicit, right? So the implicit measure, this is actually an explicit measure, but it will have implicit filtering applied to it when you're using it in a visualization like a table. This piece here is the exact same formula, except it has a calculate statement wrapped around it. And this latter piece here is the filter, is an explicit filter applied to that. There's a couple different places you can apply this sort of logic, and one of them is not mentioned because it's outside of the scope of this, but I'll just quickly mention it again, and that's applying filters in a DAX query going against an analysis services instance. In this case, we're just going to keep it clean to more Power BI and doing the DAX expressions in Power BI. So you can do it in two different places. One is in a measure and one is in a calculated column. And both have interesting implications that you need to be mindful of. And Ruth Martinez from Kerbal has a great point. She says, you have to know your DAX functions and how they work. And even still, I was quite surprised when I came from an Excel world to a Power BI world to see how Power BI did filtering and how it handled different uses of the measures that I was creating. And I got some really strange results, and it took a while to kind of figure this out. So this is a big driver for this presentation. And I just want to say thank you to Jared McKenzie for helping demystify this. This was he was a great teacher for that. So the why is all about where you're going to use it, and why is it happening? Why is this filter context happening? And the addition of the calculate function has some really, like I said earlier, it has some really interesting implications. And one is that it adds an implicit filter context. And this is a strange one. Ruth does a good job on this, and I stole this example from her. I liberated it, pardon me. We're best friends, so that's okay. I can do that. So when we have these measures and we have them in different tables, the calculations are run at different times. So when we bring the data into the Power BI file, we can bring it in two ways, right? You're either you're processing it, bringing it in from an external source, or you're basically copying and pasting it into a table that you're creating. Or I guess third one, you're generating a table inside, such as a date table. But the difference is in the calculated columns, the execution of the code happens when the data model is getting loaded. A measure such as the one at the top, when you drop it onto a canvas, the code for that gets executed at runtime. And that's why these measures change dynamically based on the filtering. So if you have a calculated column, that measure will never change, even if you filter it. You'll filter it out, but you won't change that value. So here are the resources that I mentioned: Kerbal and SQL BI. Wow, I don't know what happened there. Oh, I guess that's everything. So as I say in Guy in the Cube, let's go to my desktop, and I'll show you what I mean. So I have a couple different examples here. This is a template I have, and I just want to quickly point out, this is a great little feature that I've added, and it's a documentation on the file, and it has just different definitions and stuff like that, and information about functionality. I just wanted to point that out because I think it's a good add. So I've written a couple DAX functions, and I'll show you what they are, and they're not complicated at all. Here is some, and I'm going to start over from scratch. And I'm just going to create a table, and I'm going to drop this in, and I get one number here. And you'll notice that I can change this, the values in here, by filtering this. Oops. And so I'm changing the behavior here, and that's not a hard thing to do, and it's done dynamically. And this is important because with this, you have the dynamic filtering that you really want and need. Now, the other thing is this other slicer here is a Chiclet Slicer. Now, this is, if you look in the data model, going back to Chris's conversation earlier, this is the data model behind the scenes. It's very simple. So I just have a financial table, a table of financial data, and a date table. And there's no magic here. It's very simple. And then I have my different table for measures that I have, and I have this. It's a time frame table, and it just has two values in it. I'll show you those in a second. That's my table just for the documentation. The values in the time frame are simple. It's ID and the time frame, year to date, quarter to date, and month to date. Because that's not connected in the model, it's not going to, it won't filter this value. This is a form of filter context. There's no way that this calculation can get a value from here because it's not connected in the model. And the code is such that there is no relationship. We can address that, and I'll show you how to do that later on. But I just want to show you some other interesting pieces about filter context. Now, we were talking about, I mentioned earlier, the addition of where you can do it. And you can add a column to, calculate a column to a table. And I've done that here. And this is the same formula that we had for this. I've just copied and pasted it in here. Here's another one with calculate. Now, basically, in theory, these are the same. The same thing will happen. But in practice, it's different. And this is the piece that Kerbal did, and I found it shocking. So here's my sum formula, and here's the formula again, and it's just a sum. Now, the problem is it is going to give us the same number all the way down. And this is because there's no filter context. It just says sum. So I'm going to sum everything in this column. And it goes ahead and does that. Not particularly useful. This other column, all I've done is wrap a calculate statement around it and no filter, because normally the filter would be in here. But because I've wrapped this calculate formula around it, it gives it filter context, which I thought very strange. So you'll notice these numbers are the same all the way through. So just by wrapping that calculate statement around it, it has said Power BI now recognizes that this value should equal this one, just by giving it that row context. So I thought that was a pretty strange find. I thank you to Kerbal for that. That was she's found a lot of oddities in DAX. There's one that she found recently about calendars and the function blank, which is really weird. If you haven't seen that, go look it up. It is, it hurts the gray matter. So this is my sales function that I had earlier. Nothing, here's the magic of it. Now you'll notice that it sums the data automatically, and it looks just like one of these cards. Now you'll notice that if I filter these filter properly. This filter here only filters this set of values. And the reason that it does that is because of the formula behind the scenes. So kind of getting ahead of myself, but this table here is what we're going to be working with. And you have sales here, the value, and I'm just going to add date to it. And by doing that, I've created context. So now, for
Trevor,
this date,
1 minute warning, Trevor.
Oh, wow, 1 minute. Okay. So this is filter context in a nutshell, right? You have this filter context through here. Now, we also can apply an explicit filter, and that's this here, right? We've applied the same period last year. And by adding that, you now have another column that has a proper filter context. Just quickly, this function here actually handles the relationship to the time frame. So that's how you can actually force the filter context onto this calculation and join to that categorical table. Okay, so that's all I have. I'm 30 seconds over, I think. Chris, everyone else, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Take care and have a good day, and may your solutions land jam side up.